Hey everybody, welcome back to Eggs. Today's special guest is Greg Martin. Greg, thanks for coming to the show. How are you?
Awesome. I'm great today. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thrilled to have you. Thanks so much for making the time.
Yeah. For sure.
So Greg, can you give us a brief overview of who you are and what you do, just so we can get the conversation going?
Yeah, so today I'm a investment banker. I'm focused on M&A. A lot of what I do is helping businesses of various kind sell themselves effectively. It's a lot of what we do, sell side processes. It's oftentimes a founder who has built a business, could be a family business, and we help them sell it. But it doesn't have to be. There's lots of situations where shareholders may want to exit a business. And then I also help with capital raising, so companies who are trying to grow, who need an investor, and with that, and as well acquisitions. So where a business is trying to grow through buying maybe their competitor or in another business in a different field. And so that's my day job. Otherwise I live in Canada, Toronto area. Born and raised here, and I also host a podcast on the side. It's called Lifetime at Work, and in there I focus a lot on what it means to work, what are we trying to achieve, career advice, that sort of stuff, and that's sort of my main life, in addition to family and whatever hobbies I can have with kids who are 4 and 7. So,
which isn't many.
It's not a lot, no.
Yeah, no, we get that. So, all right. So there's a million directions I want to go with you. I think maybe first, let's start kind of on the front end with your podcast, because I think if we're talking kind of a natural evolution, we might start with a job before we start a business. So let's start there, and let's talk a little bit about jobs. And I wonder if you could talk about how you've noticed things changing over the last several years. I spend a bunch of time. I've been working remote basically my entire professional career. And during COVID and all that stuff, I spent a lot of time trying to advise people on how to handle working alone and working independently, from home, and how to deal with isolation and things like that. But, it's because the whole job market took a wild shift. So My question for you would be, what have you seen? I mean, obviously you had some insights on jobs prior to COVID. During COVID was obviously an exception, and then now we're back. So I wonder if you could talk about any sort of top level trends or things that you've identified in the job market, and maybe how things have changed for job seekers.
Yeah, obviously there's the big one, which you mentioned, which is where am I working physically? Where am I going to be? And that's sort of transitioned. I would say if we park that for 1 second, because we can come back to it. I think the other big one is people are trying to, and this is what I feel, they're trying to get more out of work than just money. It's not really about hey, I'm going to work and then go home and I just sort of, I work to make money to support whatever else I'm doing. I'm a big believer in this idea that a lot of your life is your work, and that a lot of the impact that we make and the enjoyment that we get and just the fulfillment that we have in our lives is related to that work. And I just found that myself. I never really knew that I was just stumbling upon that, but as I've gotten older and have spent more time in the world of work, I've realized that myself. And I feel like that is happening with a lot of others as well. And that's sort of the conversations that I feel like I'm having with people. It's not always about, hey, I'm trying to get more money or I'm trying to get that promotion. It's like, I want to enjoy my work and I want to, get some of that fulfillment out of it and find a place where I'm accepted and people appreciate my work and where I'm moving up and all that. And I think that goes hand in hand with the where am I working, right? A lot of people are trying to figure that out, and that balance of, okay, am I the type of person that needs to have people around me in person physically to thrive, to enjoy what I'm doing? Or, am I someone who can get the work done, can find fulfillment by being, call it, at home, and then, use that extra time that I have, maybe not commuting, not whatever, to enjoy my life better. And so I think that's probably, certainly all the conversations I've had over the last, 2-3 years, I feel like have centered around that of where am I working, and how, the pandemic and this new kind of shift to making it a lot easier to work remotely, what that impact has had on us.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Like I keep kind of toggling back and forth on what this is, right? Because at first my gut impulse was that this whole new trend in, really looking out for yourself and not looking out for the company, it seems like, was sort of an opportunistic grab based on people's desperation after COVID, right? And then the more I look at it, the more I start going, you know what? Like, because I'm pretty out of the loop. I haven't had a day job in a lot of years, and so, but then I start looking at my own life, and I go, well, you know what? I mean, a big part of my career, and the reason I don't go back to work for somebody, is because I'm trying to design a lifestyle or design a way of doing life that allows me the time I need with my friends and family, allows me the time I have to earn good money and work professionally. And, so why shouldn't everybody have that, right? And it seems like obviously there's a clear delineation now between sort of what, or not as clear of delineation, I should say, between what was work and what is life. People have been throwing around this concept of work-life balance for a lot of years, but it's like, in the 50s, 60s or whatever, like, I mean, I don't know, you work some crappy job and then you come home and it's like, but there's clear delineation. Like once I'm done, I'm not even thinking about work. I'm just home. But now I think because of technology and everything else, people can get, you're accessible at home now. And so for at least white collar careers, it seems very obvious that people are starting to blur the line a little bit between their professional life and their personal life. And to your point, I think it's, it literally is just life. Like there isn't a separation anymore. It's just the same thing. And so I wonder if you talk a little bit about that, or if you could expand on this idea that, it's not just greed or just a money grab, or maybe it is, maybe you think it is, but, it's not that people are doing that. It's like, maybe this is long overdue. Maybe people needed to have this opportunity for, generations prior, but they just didn't have it then. And maybe technology has allowed it. But I hear so many people complaining about trying to hire these new millennial folks, and everybody is looking out for the lifestyle like you're talking about. But it's like, is it beholden to employers to do that kind of thing for their workers? And, is it, I guess, fair to the employers if people are coming on board looking for jobs like that?
Yeah, like I work on, call it the Bay Street, which is the Wall Street of Canada. And my work environment was pre-pandemic, was very much in the office. And that was part of I would say our company. We have a small, today it's 50 people, but a small company advantage was that we had a great environment. People enjoyed coming into the office, but it was also just what you did. and now I think what was interesting, I don't know if you found this, just again, always working remote, but as soon as the pandemic happened and we went and we were working from home, all of a sudden there was this respect for people. I don't know if it's just because you saw people's background, but all of a sudden you realized, I just found it, anecdotally happened a lot more often, where people just sort of respected that you had a life and a family and maybe kids and other things kind of going on. And that became a little bit more of the conversation. A lot of the conversations would start out with that, where you're at. Whereas before at work, it was kind of like when we were in person, we would leave that. That was not something we would really necessarily, we might ask how their weekend was, but it was more informal. And it was just like, we didn't really care as much. And I just felt like it kicked that up a notch. And I do think that is a little bit of what we have also then been left with, is this, call it respect for people, and the idea that they have appointments. They may have contractors coming to their house. They may, they have a kid pickup, or a kid who might be sick, or a dog to walk, or whatever it is. And that, there's this concept that maybe we could let them do that during the day, and that would help them out, and that would make their day, better, easier, and their lives easier. And so we've exposed all these people to that. And, like I was saying before, there then is this point, I think, where people are now trying to figure out, okay, well, what kind of worker am I, and do I need that? And is that the key? What we found at our company is that the young people, so the people who, no family, or, your early 20s, they really like coming in. The people, at least that we've hired, really like coming in because they're otherwise in some small apartment condo or something, and they're kind of lonely. And likewise with the older folks who are, maybe they have older kids or no kids, and they're just, they're used to this lifestyle where they leave the house. They've been doing it for so long. They really like going to the office. And it's these people who are in the middle, call it in their late 30s, 40s, who have kids like me, who are like, oh, I really need this. Like, it really is helpful to have a structure around my life where I can pop in and out, and I can be in the office and see people when I need to, and otherwise not. And we're all somewhere in around this in a different way. And, I wonder whether it actually becomes, as we now, you're in college and you're trying to figure out, you're in high school or whatever, trying to figure out what you do, whether you actually think that way. and whether you actually start to formulate the type of worker you're going to be and the line of work you go into based on where you want it and that balance. And obviously, certain, like my wife's a teacher, she has to go in, like that's just part of her, what she wants, but she also feels it's part of her personality. If you're in the medical profession, or if you're in any sort of trades, you're obviously you kind of, it's hard to do that remote, and so that is a field you're going to go into if you like that. And if you're in somewhere else, you may then just say, okay, well, I really like that idea of being home and flexibility of doing all these things together, and sort of merging this work and this home life together, and that's where I'm going to trend. And we're not there yet because it hasn't been long enough, but I sort of think that's where we'll go.
Yeah. I'm kind of in between. I've been self-employed for a long time, and I went and took a day job over the summer, and it was actually quite refreshing to have that structured schedule and people there at work and the interaction instead of just hanging out here all day. So I can see why someone would want to come into the office and have that community outside of the home life. And I can also see why having the remote access is also really important too, because like you said, kids sick, it's nice to be able to work from home and take care of them. So it'll be really interesting to see how the effects of COVID linger longer in the workforce and the remote work and what will happen over the next little bit. There's also a lot of speculation on what's going to happen with the future of work based off of, the advent of AI, what's going to happen to jobs that exist that won't exist in 10 years. And it's going to be interesting to see that as well. What do you have any thoughts on that, by the way?
On AI specifically?
Well, just on the future of work and tech that's continually evolving. Like I went to school for software development, and it looks like that's not going to be a thing here shortly.
Yeah, I do think you have to. I think it leaves us, or maybe my takeaway is that back, I don't know how long it was, 50 years ago or something, it was very much like you went to school once. You got one career and that was the one. And you got the training and then you were that until you retired. And that was just the way it was. I do think we're just heading more and more to this idea of completely different, where you've got to be nimble and you may have multiple careers. And part of those multiple careers may just be that there's not a need for that anymore because technology has replaced it, or you don't love it anymore, or maybe it's still there, but it's changed so much that it's had you say, okay, well, I'm going to use the skills that I have to now translate them to something else. And I do think it's just going to mean we're going to iterate. And I think, artificial intelligence is just going to push it more, where, we're going to focus on different things, and that will mean that we have more jobs and have to have an open mind. And if you're, the type of person and approach your career as one where, again, I'm just, I've got this skill and I'm going to just do this until the job doesn't exist anymore. I mean, that is one strategy, but it might not be a good one. And you may need to just be on the ball a little bit and thinking, okay, I need to head a little bit towards where the trends are, where the needs are, using the skills that I have, because that's just going to be part of what I need to do as part of, the career I've chosen and the field of work I want to be in. So I don't think we all of a sudden have this mass extinction of jobs super quickly. You've seen it for sure happen in various fields, in the media and newspapers, and people have had to shift to different things. But I just think more of that will happen as we develop.
Yeah, I think that's right. And that's been the case, across history with technology as it evolves. When the horse and buggy people were probably really irritated at the Model T, and
100%.
the Model T folks were probably really bummed at Elon Musk or whatever, and so it's like, there's I think that there's always going to be this evolution, right? But to Mike's point, it is frustrating for people who have tried to pick a line of work and now may find themselves obsolete. I suspect we will have some time before that happens, but still, I can understand that. And maybe part of it has to do with my age. Like, I'm still old enough that the loyalty to your employer was a thing, and so so there's a lot of, even in my own careers and stuff like that. The jobs I've held and the things I've done have tended to be longer than what I hear people doing today, where it's kind of jumping every couple of years to get the new promotion or to get a little more money or to get a little better opportunity. And it seems like there's a little less of that sort of long-term hold on employers than there used to be. And I don't know if that will continue to be the case. Maybe it's just part of sort of our evolution, but it does seem like there's part of that.
Totally. Yeah. So, I think I do imagine us are going to just, we're going to just more and more have that less of that loyalty, I think, going forward.
Yeah. Well, and that's, I think, maybe the thing to try and avoid, right, is fully becoming a every man for themselves kind of world. I think if we get to a spot where everybody is just looking for their own opportunity and their own thing, which, I mean, at some level we have to do that. But I mean, it seems like there's an opportunity there for us to actually become even more disjoint as a community. If we're all of a sudden all scrambling because we've all been offset by technology. So hopefully it'll be a smoother transition. So one of the other things that came up during COVID and, just as it pertains to jobs and job holders is entrepreneurship, a rise in entrepreneurship. People who had time to sit and think about the things they wanted to do, and they leveraged the opportunity of COVID and being home for a couple of years to start building businesses. So knowing that so much of your work is, working with entrepreneurs to grow business and, get that first $1 million and then the subsequent, and then also to eventually maybe leverage that, asset as something they can sell or do more with. I wondered if you'd talk a little bit about sort of the entrepreneur coming into the game now, and if you were building a business today, how you might do it differently than, say, when you spun up your business, or maybe is it the same, like all fundamental kind of business stuff?
Yeah. So the backstory on me was I mentioned sort of this investment banking world, and I was actually part of the group who founded the firm we are today, and a lot of us had worked at sort of the big banks and decided, we can do this differently and let's start a new company. But in the midst of that, that was 2011. In 2017, I also had invested and effectively started a food business. It was like a restaurant business that also did a lot of corporate catering. And what eventually led me to leave my job, or to leave what I was doing with the investment banking business and go and run and work in that food business for a while. And we got upended by the pandemic quite hard. I mean, I had sort of, I had, spent a bunch of time learning the business, trying to figure out food business is very hard. There's low margins. There's a lot of challenges, which we knew going into it, but I just sort of had a passion for it. And then, because we were so office focused, that was really our customer. When the pandemic hit, it just became, incredibly challenging. We were, having to pivot and deliver food all over the province. And it was just, it was very challenging. And I, ended up sort of leaving that business and just, I think, learning a ton, though, and, financially awful. It was not a great timing for me whatsoever, but, I left it with just learning a ton about the actual world. And I had sort of spent all this time, call it, advising entrepreneurs. Here's what you should do with your business. Here's how you sell for the most value. Here's, here's the strategy you should take to do whatever it is that you want to do. And it was, me, though, going out and actually starting a business and learning the hard way and everything that was involved, where I think that you just, get an education on that and really build a foundation. And so that was what it was for me. And I do see that with a lot of people. I mean, we're certainly in this culture right now where people will have, side businesses in addition to what they're doing. They, lose their job, and instead of thinking about a new job, they think of creating one and creating a business. And it is a lot of, I think, just, the way I sort of have originally attributed was it's kind of a way to express ourselves where, when you work for an organization, it's really a lot of the products of what you produce is not really, you can't really call it your own. You only have so much tangible, like, hey, I created this. Or when you go and start a business, it's all you. And for good or for bad, what you create, what you don't or not able to do, all that is you. And that there's that sort of expression of like, here's who I am, here's what I'm going to do. I want to create something that is sort of gets us into entrepreneurship in the first place. And that's what it was for me, I think. I didn't realize it until I probably, way later in the game and when we had done it. But, that's what I kind of got out of it. And I do feel and I do see so many people sort of doing that. And again, now having done it, feel like I can provide a lot of advice and expertise on sort of the pros and cons of doing it. Cause I do think that it's one of these where, it's not all good for me. Again, there was certainly, hard things that I had to learn just by, by virtue of kind of being in and having my own business.
Yeah. So to add to that, I just wanted to ask. So, I mean, one thing that seemed, and I'm kind of making this scenario up. So tell me if this isn't your experience, but it seems like, with a lot of people who are spinning up businesses, as a result of COVID, or maybe they finally got the push they needed to do it during that time. Seems like a lot of these folks are probably not your traditional entrepreneurs, the guys that went to business school, the guys that are trying to do this. Instead, it's, a person who, I don't know, it makes great tortillas and now they're going to spin up a tortilla factory or, whatever it is. Right. And so it seems like with a lot of those types of businesses, and I'm speaking from my own experience a little bit here, where you start a business based on a skill or a trade, that you end up in a pickle down the road when it comes to like mergers and acquisitions time, where you maybe aren't in a good position to sell because maybe you don't have great systems in place, or maybe you're the core of the business and so you're not an attractive buy. So I wonder if you talk about, businesses that you've approached that maybe you would say aren't quite ready for sale. Maybe they don't have the productization or the systems in place to make them an attractive business for a merger. I wonder if you would talk about just getting or making a company, I guess, sale ready.
Yeah. So I would say that I mean, in theory, you can sell any business. It doesn't have to be, it's just, whether you're doing this for millions and millions of dollars and trying to create a large organization, or whether it's something super small that you do for yourself. And I'd say that, a lot of entrepreneurs who, like you mentioned, aren't business people and just, again, make tortillas or do something small, a lot of times they build a business just to allow them to do what they do. And it's not something that you're necessarily even trying to sell. You may hire people to support what you're doing, but you have a skill, or a product, and you want to share that with the world and sell that. And you need to create, things around you that allow you to do that. And so that's sort of, I call it, one type of business where I would argue you're not really thinking about that, right? You're not really thinking about trying to create this giant organization. You don't even want that. You're just trying to, support yourself and almost, create your own job with support around it and keep it as a small business. And there's so many of those, right? There's so many of those around, around North America, all over it. Then I would say there's this other, and sometimes it's created when you realize you've got something here. You've got the best tortilla in the world, and now you want to brand it and sell it in grocery stores everywhere or in the restaurants, and you decide that you want to kick it up a notch and go to the next level. In which case, I think you are trying to. Then the key thing is figuring out, okay, well, what skills do I have? What am I really good at? And then how do I build the people around me that can do the things that I'm going to need to actually make this into a really big business, and that can work with me here to sort of do that. And that's a big leap, right? There's all these, and I find that there's always these kind of leaps that you need to take to again take it up a notch and to take your business to another level, because you can go and do that and can go from, call it, 5 people or less to then sort of 20 people and then to 50 people, and to kind of make those shifts. They're really hard. I think, as to answer your question around kind of making it M&A ready, the key thing when you are, approaching or thinking about selling your business is to actually think about, who can buy it and, who you can build this for, and just whether they would actually like to do it. And I, frankly, like I maybe I'm biased, but I think the key thing in that is starting early in talking to your competitors, talking to people in the financial world, talking to brokers, and honestly real estate agents are involved in this a lot too, and just sort of thinking about, okay, well, what do I have here that has value that someone might buy from me, that would actually really help someone else in their business benefit. And that's really what kind of where you have to start to go in terms of the thinking and the thought process as you think, hey, I'm going to sell my business, because there may be some very obvious things that you should do that are needed to kind of get it ready, or that might just create a lot of value for you, where someone else may or may not sort of recognize that and actually pay you for that value or for what you created.
Yeah. Is there, say for example, you have a business going and you've started it with the end result in mind to sell. Are there certain things that they should focus on? Like financials. Could they set themselves up to be acquired at a higher value versus just, I've got a business. This is my, I have 5 employees. This is my overhead. This is my income. This is my debt to income ratio, yada, yada, yada. Are there certain things that they should focus on to maybe get a higher offer versus just going at it willy nilly and hoping that they get a good return?
Yeah, I would say a few things. The world has, certainly for buyers, the world has become very focused on metrics. You hear KPIs, whatever you call them, and so trying to understand what yours are, whether that be growth, whether that be something margins, whether that may be a customer enters your store or fills out a form on the website, and how likely are you to convert that into a sale, and how much revenue do you get from that, and the life cycle of that and all that. Those start to become really important. And so I'd say the key, one of the key things is to start to understand your industry from that perspective, and where you fit in and how you can improve that and show growth and show traction there. It's one of the things that I think any investor or any buyer is going to sort of really look at. Again, the world, especially when you think of private equity buyers out there, you think of search funds, which are kind of individuals who are backed by financial, some sort of financial groups who are trying to buy your business and operate it. They're really going to focus on, okay, well, what are the metrics here, and how do I compare that to other transactions, other businesses out there? Because they'll have lots of options, or they'll have different kind of opportunities out there. So I'd say that's one bucket. The other one is kind of the operations of it. In many cases, and this pretty much happens with any business starting out, is you become very reliant on what's often one person and maybe a few who operate the business, and it's usually the founder who is there day to day and really driving kind of everything, and you remove them from the business and it kind of falls apart. And it's really important, I think, to set up a business where that's not the case, where you can where the business can operate by itself, or without you kind of being there all the time. And a lot of people talk about that. One, for your own freedom as an owner to being able to do that. But I think as well, if the value is all in you as a person, then yes, maybe someone will be able to, someone will buy your business regardless, but it might mean that you have to stick around in that business for a long time and continue to sort of operate it and be there day to day, which may not be the goal or what you have as your intentions when you're deciding to sell your business. So, there's lots of them, but I would say those are, it's kind of two main categories and areas where which are pretty important.
Yeah, I've run into this in the past, actually. Like I could potentially sell my business to someone, but I'm kind of like the asset. I have a bunch of equipment. I could go and sell that by itself or sell it as a business. But most people, when they come to hire me, they're hiring me, not my equipment. And so it kind of makes that really hard to sell, unless I just want to bundle it all together and sell it as an asset and get rid of it, and not necessarily, because when people hire me, they're hiring me as a personality, as a DJ, as someone who's running the event kind of thing. Whereas someone can come and set it up, they're not going to get the same performance out of someone else. So it's kind of like a catch-22, So hard to sell something like that versus, I've got a franchise of 5 Subways, pretty easy to put the numbers together on something like that, versus if you're the key factor and the business is built around you, it's a little harder to sell. So that's something you want to keep in mind. We had a guest on about 1.5 years ago. His name was Ryan Carson. He founded Team Treehouse, and his business, he actually sold it, and he was able to make, I think it was like a $23 million purchase. So he did pretty well on that business. He's been gone for about 1 year, and now he's started another one. Ryan, I need to actually talk to you about this because he might be coming back on. But he's been able to, his first business was like an online learning platform. He had a lot of employees, a lot of overhead, and he just started a brand new one that's like an online AI coach kind of thing. Like his first startup, he had a lot of overhead. Now he's doing it again, but he's able to do it by himself. The whole game is changing, and it's very intriguing to me to see how someone can do a tech startup 5 years ago with 20 employees, and now he's doing it all over again with just himself because of the change in technology. Have you seen stuff like that in recent acquisitions and stuff that you're working on? Have you seen a lot of changes as far as like with the ability of tech and the ability of what's coming down the pipeline to start something and actually get it acquired with less and less overhead and less expenses? Have you run across that in your day-to-day operations?
You know what? I would say there was a time where that was the case. We've kind of been in a bit of a lull for that because there was a time where you could create a website and the website, for whatever reason, would get a lot of traction. They just get a lot of traffic, and that would have a lot of value. And you could actually be an individual who would do that. And whether you were a brand or not or whatever, that would have value, and you could sell it, and you could be an individual. It was really just like, hey, I happen to get this great domain and turn that into something that was really interesting. And so there was a time there, and there was actually a lot of value there. And I remember working with a few businesses who were sort of thinking about that, and you were just sort of astonished at, one individual who, it's kind of like the Zuckerberg thing where they just sort of, turn up in a hoodie or something like that and shorts, and you're like, this guy, and they created something, and that was sort of the trend. That's kind of gone away though. I think, I don't know, for whatever reason, like I hadn't really encountered a lot of businesses in that real vein. But you're right. I think AI, may be another opportunity for those types of businesses, especially when you've got something sort of new here, hasn't been done before, where you basically build something and you can do a lot of that or leverage sort of your expertise, knowledge, whatever, and then use technology. Buy a lot. Maybe you've got sort of consultants in and around and things that can really not be part of the company, and you're sort of putting together those components. The hard part of it, and the hard part, when you go to sell the business, is really, again, what are people buying? And the big worry for a buyer is, okay, well, I buy this thing, and then does it, you're the only one who knows anything about it, and there's a ton of risk that something happens to you, or that you leave and then it falls apart. And so I think when it comes to a sale, there's a bit of a different strategy, I think, around articulating that and packaging things and saying, okay, well, here's what you're buying. You're actually buying all of the processes and things that I created, and the audience and the customer lists and all that sort of stuff. And so it's a little bit of a different package when you're trying to extract the most value probably out of a business like that, because you can't say it's the team that I created, or it's the people, or it's the the assets, or whatever it might be, because it's a little bit different.
So, is there a clientele that you focus on as an investment banker? Is there a niche that you go after?
Yeah, so I mean, like I mentioned, I have this this food background, so I do spend a lot of time in kind of the food, consumer, and technology space. I'd say is probably where I focus the most. With investment bankers and in Canada, we're typically a little more broad because we don't have as deep of a market. We're a smaller country, and you end up, I think, covering and seeing a lot more. Whereas in the U.S., what you'll notice is there's an incredible amount of specialization, and typically an advisor will be incredibly niche, and they will actually focus on AI specific businesses of the size of under 30 people, and that can be a specialization sort of thing. So but yeah, in Canada we're that much more broad, and that's what sort of where I focus.
Sure.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. Well, and it's interesting as I'm listening to you guys talk, and I'm thinking about some of the prior things we talked about. It seems to me that there's sort of this recurring theme around flexibility, around being sort of agile and able to move around, whether you're a worker who, we discussed loyalty and things like that, meaning sticking with the company through and through, but I think we've discovered or sort of agree that the sort of future of work is probably a more flexible thing than that. Same with entrepreneurship. Maybe we don't need to build for a merger. Maybe we just want to do our thing and run our little business and eventually, pass it off to our kids or whatever. And so I think that there's a lot in there. And so I wonder if you talk a little bit about it too, just in that your career is really diverse. I noticed when I was prepping for the show that you had one of our past guests, Karthik Suresh, on your podcast, and he was talking a little bit about getting stuck in careers and that sort of led me to think about flexibility in business and things like that. And so I wonder if you just sort of talk about developing a mindset for flexibility. And, maybe this isn't your expertise, but really maybe more from your life experience. Can you talk about having to be agile or make these different moves, make the decision to get into food, unless you come from a long line of farmers or something, and there's a reason that you were in food, why food, and then why business and why banking and why mergers and acquisitions, some of these things kind of make sense. They talk to each other, but then there's this oddball of running a food company there in the middle. And so I just wonder if you talk a little bit about just sort of the thought process and sort of how you tick as somebody who's obviously displayed some flexibility in the work that you do and the way that you apply your skills to different things. And then if we try and frame it in a way that might be useful for a person listening to the show who might feel like they're kind of stuck or maybe regimented into, doing things the way they've always done it. I wonder if you talk about sort of just the skills that you had to develop to be able to make those rapid shifts or to be able to make these, what from the outside look like a 90-degree turn.
Yeah, and I think I've seen a lot of this, and I think it's part of the reason why I sort of started the podcast, or my podcast, is really around exploring that, because I do think there's this, and I had it too a little bit, where maybe you're making a decision in college, university about what you want to do, and you think and you see these people who have it all figured out, like they've just, they know exactly what they're going to study and what mark they need, what job they're going to get, what where they're going to live, what car they're going to drive, and everything. And I would say, I don't know if it's most of us, but a lot of us don't know, right? We just kind of, maybe we're a little bit jealous and we don't really know about it. And I would say that, whether you're either type of person, you have no idea, or you really know, I don't think that you actually do know. I think that you in your head, you feel like, hey, this is a direction, and you kind of need that knowledge, you need that path. But I actually think that, one of the fun things maybe about the world of work is that you can actually just go and start. You just need to do that. You need to go and you need to get a job. And by going and doing that job, you start to learn about yourself. You start to learn what you're good at, what you like. You start to gain skills. You start to interact with people, build a network. You start to get familiar with this, whatever it is, with this job, with this line of work. And I think that's what's really cool about it. Like, I think that, you then probably, I don't know, it was every 2 years, maybe it's every 5 years, but somewhere in there, you kind of have this option of like, do I stick with the company that I'm at now, or do I go and do I learn something else? And, I've certainly gotten that advice, and I keep hearing it from people, especially who are older and who've done different things, like, I guess, kind of like I have, where they say like, no, like use your 20s to to explore what's out there. You don't know, like you think, or you have this very narrow view based on, who your family friends were and everything when you were growing up. And like, you really don't know what's out there in the world of work. And you can travel, you can work anywhere in the world, and you can work in all these different jobs, and you can, there's just so much out there, but you have to go out and you have to start that journey. And so, some of the advice I've heard people say is, yeah, spend your 20s doing that, and just, build a foundation of all these different things. And then, later on, you can figure out what exactly you want to do and niche into that a little bit more. And I think that that's what I'm doing. Like, I feel like, as much as I, have a job today and enjoy doing it, I'm still very open to these other ideas and this concept of, hey, I'm probably going to get bored of whatever I'm doing, and I'm going to need a new something later on. And I think that's good. And I think that's sort of an expression of who we are, and just a way of having this journey, going through this journey of life.
Yeah. Now, you made a really good point there that I like, is this idea of sort of self-discovery, right? Because I think as a society, and I think social media has sort of kept us going, but I think we spend a lot of time, and maybe I'm secretly just talking about myself. Maybe everybody just thinks I'm out of my mind, but it seems to me that we spend a lot of time chasing down the things that other people want, and not necessarily the things that we want. And I think that this might be part of the thing that traps people into a career is, well, I just go to the factory because I've always gone to the factory. What am I going to do? What am I supposed to do? At home, they might be having other thoughts, which, oh man, I hate the factory. I'd rather be doing this or that or the other thing. But, I'll just go to the factory. I went to the factory. My dad went to the factory. We all went to the factory. It's what we do. And so I wonder if you talk a little bit about it. And I don't know. I mean, this is a little existential or a little philosophical. So, I mean, maybe you don't have a clear answer for this. But just in the spirit of sort of, I guess, our own self-reflection, how do we get to a spot where we're comfortable pivoting? And again, I'll just use your example of going from investment banking to a food service company, just being that, at least on the surface, a very different type of business. But clearly it was like, hey, I want to do this. Like, this is a thing I want to do. So you pursued it, versus hey, it's the family business. We always did this. Or, I'm an investment banker. So I guess I'll move on to the next investment banking opportunity. Here you did something that's totally random or seemingly random and entrepreneurial. So, how do we get to a point where we're comfortable doing the things that we want and not the things that they want, they in quotes?
I think it is that self-discovery. And for me, it's always been, so the advice that I give people, and I think, me leaving a job and whatever, is that by leaving a job, so say you are a lawyer and you decide that you've had enough of law and you want to go do something else for a while. What's interesting is that you are actually, my perspective is you're incredibly well trained as a lawyer. So if you work for 5-10 years, whatever it might be, you can always go back. Someone's going to hire you. You've got that foundation. You've built that up. Like that's not going anywhere. You will sort of always have that. You can take a break and go and do something else. Now the challenge is when you go and do something else, especially if it's a job, like something completely different. Say you want to go, I don't know, start a band. You're probably not going to be that good at it, right? And so people aren't going to pay you a lot for it. And you're probably not selling out right from day one. You're going to have to learn it. You're going to have to start at the bottom. And that's the hard part, right? We spent all this time building ourselves up, learning a skill, getting good in a certain career trajectory. And then we shifted. And so, I do think it leaves us to learn a lot, but it does hurt from a, financial perspective. You're probably not making as much money. You probably have to start, lower, and maybe you don't like that. And so, but it is a bunch of skills, and you are going to learn sort of these new skills and doing something new. And I think that's why you do it. And that's why I did it. I was, really, I had felt that I was a bit stuck and that I wanted to learn more, and that I could always go back. And so that's the advice that I give people is, yes, head down a trajectory, but think about it as you're going through it. If you really want to do something else, like I just knew that for myself, like, my parents are entrepreneurs. I've got uncle, like lots of people around me are entrepreneurs. I needed to do it. There was no way that I wasn't going to sort of start my own business at some point in my life. It wasn't an if, it was a when. And so I did that, and I had to, and there was good and bad that came out of it. I just at the very least learned a lot, and I was able to go back and do, and maybe I'll start another business, who knows? But I think it's kind of that in you in a lot of ways. And again, you're only building skills. You're not necessarily sort of losing them. And I don't think you're, as long as you don't leave and and tell off everyone at your, in your old industry and your old boss and how much you hate them, and you leave on good terms, you can go back, or you can enter that industry once again and probably with a better perspective because you've done something different and learned a bunch of other skills.
Yeah, no,
So
I like that.
Was food a passion? Was that you just love cooking at home and thought, I'll do this on a larger scale? And was that what drove that, or was it you found an opportunity and went for it?
Yeah, it took a long time. Like it was years of me sort of thinking about it, and really it was that I knew that I wanted to start a business of some sort at some point. I didn't know what. And I think with food, I think the way I justified it was really around, I want to learn about this industry. And even if I'm not successful or the business isn't successful, I don't pick the perfect idea, I will enjoy the environment and I will learn a lot because I'm, really intrigued by and really want to learn about this world and this industry. And that was what did it for me. I do think there's a certain amount of like, you have to enjoy it and you have to be excited about what you're getting into, and that's what excited me. And so yeah, it was a little bit of me enjoying probably eating out and really good culinary experiences out there. I enjoy cooking for sure. I enjoy food. I found myself anyways in my day-to-day job really spending time doing that and thinking about food a lot. And so it sort of made a lot of sense to me. And there's pros and cons of that. I wouldn't say that needs to be the case for everyone starting a business. It doesn't have to be something that you're incredibly passionate about. And sometimes, some people say, hey, I love sports and I love food. And there's so many other businesses besides sports and food or something, right? Like there's a lot out there. And so I think, it's one way to go.
Yeah. Can I ask you too then, so, given, sort of this overarching theme of flexibility in this conversation, and then also just this entrepreneurial thing, like, if it's not sensitive to talk about, when do we know to call it quits? So in the case of your business, at some point you said, it's just not working anymore. You sort of explained how you got to that conclusion. But for a lot of people, I think that this is where that stuckness comes from, right? Is we're stuck in our business, we're stuck in our life, we're stuck in our job, we're stuck in our thing. And a big part of it is that either we're insecure or not brave enough to take that step out, or maybe we don't know, for our own good, like maybe we don't
Yeah.
realize that we should be stepping out. But I wonder if you have any thoughts about, when it's time to dissolve.
Yeah. I mean, and dissolve, you mean go and take a leap and, and leave something,
Yeah, it could
right?
be anything else. Maybe it's just, but whatever. What, I think the term you used was walk away from your business and sort of be done with it. But I mean, I doubt if you just left a bunch of people there thrashing around hoping they'd get paid. So I suspect that walking away meant, well, we decided to close the doors.
Yeah, it's very hard to like when you have a job, it's very easy to just tell your boss quit. I quit. When you have a business and it's kind of yours and you started it, it's quite challenging to exit. It just takes time. For me, it was a mental health thing. I couldn't stop. I couldn't sleep. And so just because we were in the pandemic, the bills were racking up. It was hard to know. The environment was changing, and it was very clear to me and sort of the group of us that it was needed to happen. And so, but at the same time, it's not like you can just all of a sudden then the next day be done with it. And so, I think it's a passion thing, right? You get into your own business and you do it because you're passionate about it. And at a certain point, you're maybe less passionate about it, and that excitement turns to worry. And I think when that happens, and that was me, it was again probably more emotional than anything. That's what happened. Working in the M&A world, though, one of the things that I've found is that there are probably too many people who sell or exit their business because of emotion. And funny enough, and really, it's not great. Like if you want to maximize the value and the proceeds of coming to a buyer and saying, I've had enough, I really want to sell, like this, I can't do this another day, is like this juicy, like, okay, you've come to the right spot. I don't have to pay very much, right? So you really don't want to be in that position. So, what I would encourage people to do, I mean, if you can, is to try to have the business operate as much and really work towards, and it's hard, but work towards having a business that operates by itself and where you don't have to be in it day to day, and where when it comes time to selling, you can as your job as the founder owner can just focus on that and not be worried about, I need to sell this business now, but be patient and say, okay, I'm willing to sell the business, however I don't need to, and that is really the best position. Easier said than done, but that is really the best position to sort of maximize what you're doing.
Yeah, that was sort of going to be my follow on was for the people who are emotional or up and down. I mean, I'm one of these guys that spins up businesses all the time, but they never really go anywhere because my passion feigns, right? Like I get all fired up for a thing and then I do all the things. And like, I work in branding and marketing. And so we spend a lot of time spinning up the brand. And then when it comes down to the brass tacks of we actually have to go build a business now, I don't really have that. So I sort of walk away from it, And so I have, lots of dead on arrival little startups that I've wanted to do over the years because I get really passionate about an idea and then walk away. And so, so I was going to just sort of ask, about, how long do we chase our passion? And at some point, do we need to suffer a little bit, even if we've decided that, this isn't our passion anymore, is it worth the suffering? And it sounds like maybe in an M&A perspective, it is anyway, to maybe suffer a little bit longer just to get a little better deal.
I'm the same way. I've written so many business plans, and I have a giant list of business ideas that
and I have a few that I regret that I didn't chase down, because there's a couple of them that I really think would be fun little businesses and cool things to run. And I keep telling myself I'll come back to them or whatever. And just, I don't know if there will ever be time or interest or whatever, or I see somebody else do it better than I would have done. And, it's a real challenge, but I guess that I tend to be pretty impulsive around what's passion and what isn't anymore. And so I was curious how that would play like in a career. If you're stuck in your career and you took the job because you're passionate, but suddenly you're not, at some point, if you just have to kind of ride it out anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I also find just asking people around you is super helpful. Like sometimes we sort of hold these things back and not mention it, but just like ask your best friends or whatever, they will probably tell you whether you're crazy or not, and whether the idea is crazy or not. And they're probably, as easily as they don't understand, they're usually right.
We're almost at that time. You want to tell us a little bit about your podcast and how you got into that and why you're doing it, and then share some links where people can find you.
Yeah, like the quick story of how I got into it was, when I started my career, I sort of told myself it was investment banking is a lot of hours. It's 100-hour weeks, sometimes more, sometimes less. And I said, I'll do this for 2 years, and then I'll go find something else exciting to do. And I've hit the 10-year mark, and I had this crisis of like, what the hell am I doing? Why am I still here? Is this the rest of my life? And so within all that, started this other food business and did a lot of things, but within all that, and kind of once that was going, I realized that I was having this conversation with people of my age, kind of in our mid 30s, just saying like, what are we trying to? We've worked, yes, but what are we trying to achieve and get out of our job? And what is some of the career advice we wish we had or gave? And a lot of times it's just hard to know what jobs are out there, what direction to head. So that's what the podcast is, called Lifetime at Work, and it's an interview with a different guest in a different industry. But the idea is, give some career advice. Tell us the journey and the story that you went through, and instill upon that people who are maybe at a similar point, or maybe much younger, trying to figure out what to do, where to go, and the the pros and cons and what it's like. So so it's Lifetime at Work. You can find it on all the channels. Lifetimeatwork.com is the website. It's kind of a side project, passion thing that I do on the side to kind of help out what I consider, people trying to figure out their careers. Because I'm just a big advocate for like, you should love your job, and there's so much that you can get out of it. And sometimes it's a lot about perspective and really understanding yourself and the job and what you can get out of it.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's really good to have a resource like that too, for job seekers, for people who are stuck in careers, for people who are, just at any different stage of work or business, to try and understand what's going on in the job market. I tend to see a lot of people, just given my network, a lot of young, right out of college, UX designers or graphic designers, people like this, that are having a really hard time finding work, because basically application processes are bizarre, and all the, you've got all your different like tracking systems and stuff that's filtering people out before they even, get a shot. So much of finding a job isn't maybe the same as it was like when I was a kid anyway. And so I think it's good to have a resource like that out there for people. It's a, valuable thing you're doing. So cool.
Well, cool.
Yeah. So, I think Mike mentioned it too, but it's sort of here at the end, we like to get just a little, where can people track you down? Where's the best spots for, if somebody wanted to reach out to you or get in touch? Obviously they can check out the podcast, but, if they wanted to try and find you, do you have a personal website or LinkedIn or another business website that you'd like people to check out?
It's the podcast website, lifetimeatwork.com. Otherwise, LinkedIn would be, look for Greg Martin, though you'll have to sort of type in Lifetime at Work. There's a lot of us out there. It's a bit of a generic name, but just Greg Martin on LinkedIn, and that's probably where I spend most of my social media time anyways.
Awesome. Well, cool. Thank you so much, Greg. We really appreciate you taking the time to visit with us today. This has been great.
Yes, thanks for having me on. Appreciate it. Thank you
Absolutely.
very much.
And thanks so much to everybody who tunes in the show this week and every week. And see you guys next time.